So imagine you're going through a terrible divorce and you've just inherited a cabin in the woods from your grandfather. You think this is a perfect time to go take my daughter there, have some mother daughter bonding time, and boom, there's an explosion at a pond nearby, and a human arm comes flying into your face. Welcome to Fictional Narrative. I'm Neri, and it is Cozy Saturday, so don't worry, that was not any kind of a real story. Today I'm reviewing Buried in a Good Book, which is the first book in the By the Book Mysteries by Tamara Berry. Typically on this series, what we do is we go through the non-spoiler review, I give a rating, a spoiler warning, and then we head into the spoilery part of the review. So in the series, we're following Tess Harrow, who is a thriller writer who is going through a hard time where her marriage has ended. She's trying to become closer to her teenage daughter because this is a painful process for both of them. And she's decided, I'm going to take my teenager into an isolated cabin in the woods with no Wi-Fi and no running water because teenagers love that. And naturally, teenagers do not get a say in where their parents decide to take them for vacation. So, unfortunately, due to that explosion in the pond, which is apparently part of a fishing practice that person was doing, both mother and daughter have been dropped into a murder mystery. And this is what captures her daughter's attention. The daughter, Gertie, wants to solve the mystery. She wasn't excited about the trip until this happened. This is the only thing that has piqued her interest and is probably has been a good source of distraction from the hard time that her family's been going through. Tess did not have this in mind, on the other hand. Now she's got to deal with the murder mystery, the possible sighting of Bigfoot, and a detective who looks suspiciously like the main character she writes about in her series. So let's talk about some positives, since already I'm like, this premise is really interesting, but also seeing from the daughter's point of view, I'm like, Mom probably needs some help. Maybe we should have looked into some therapists before we decided to go to an isolated cabin in the woods. But I digress. I really love the discussions of, as a writer, this is what she has to research, all the police procedurals and everything, because she writes about a police detective. However, when she starts becoming part of this investigation, she finds that a lot of the things that she had researched are either convenient and not absolutely legal or outdated. And there's this recognition of, I understand this is what I have to do as an author to make sure that my story goes well, and this is what I'm actually doing to help the investigation. Tess is also the kind of writer that is able to find inspiration anywhere from anybody, which is really nice in a way because you kind of see part of her writing process. I love the way this book opened up, which is, of course, how this video opened up in a way. It was really good at grasping my interest immediately, but also it's really gross. The standout character in this book, though, is Gertie, which is short for Gertrude, Tess's daughter. And Gertie's just an interesting character because early on in the book, Tess will even say she is the one who does the cooking. I don't do any cooking. Of course, with a lot of divorces as well, and this brings kind of an element of reality to it, is that there are parts of the relationship from then on in which the children tend to start picking up certain parts of roles that adults play. In this case, Gertie is the cook between her and her mother, and she has a certain standard that she likes to live by in a healthy way, and so she makes sure that her mother abides by that. Their mother and daughter relationship is actually really sweet, despite the fact that the divorce and Tess's remoteness kind of put some space between them, because as a writer, Tess, from the very beginning, you find her very absorbed in her work and is discovering things about her own daughter. Now I want to turn the attention to the actual mystery of the book. it got convoluted for me. As we mentioned before, we had the arm, we had Bigfoot. Where did we end up with those two? Did they cross? Was it necessary? The way that it was done did not make it seem like it made sense. Or rather, even if it did make sense, it was like as if you had a red herring that wasn't a red herring but could be a red herring, and then wasn't a yeah, even as I'm trying to explain it, it's like too much. There's too much going on and not enough balance in that respect. The payoff for the mystery for me just wasn't there. The motive for what had happened needed work. By the end, I was like, I just don't believe this mystery. And I wouldn't say so much that it didn't make sense. The author made sure to make it make sense in the sequence of events. But when I sit back and I think about it, I'm like, it's kind of dumb. I also found the sheriff who was heading the investigation to be particularly dislikable, on top of the fact that Tess Harrow herself is one of the most annoying protagonists I have ever read in any cozy mystery ever. And I've read a lot of people making dumb decisions in these books. Tess doesn't make dumb decisions. Tess is actually quite smart. It's her personality. In which case, Gertie saved this book for me, and she's not even like the main focus. So ultimately, what did I rate this book? 2 out of 5. I will not be revisiting this series, and to go further into why, this is your warning. I am going into the spoiler section now. So, as I said in the beginning, Gertie has reasons to be upset with her mom, and she is the character that saved this book for me. I wanted to continue to find out how things end up between mother and daughter. They do have a very sweet relationship regardless of the tension that is there. On top of which, Gertie in the book knows a lot more than she lets on, and is actually the catalyst in getting this mystery solved. I also thought that the author did a good job in keeping a small town feel. The cabin is in the woods, it's isolated, so Tess and Gertie have to travel into town, and because the town is small but lacks in certain resources, you get wonderful things like a bookmobile driven by Nikki, who is a phenomenal character as well. And I didn't want to bring her into the first portion of this video just because I thought it might be a little bit too much on the spoiler end. But Nikki is a really good character until she does some really, really questionable things in order to get Tess to eventually stop investigating. Which, by the way, it's not just her. Like, at first, we're like, okay, Nikki is very, very gossipy, so we understand that. So, obviously, she wants Tess to investigate because she loves Tess as a writer, and then she goes and investigates with Tess sometimes. But then eventually, she backs off. Like, Tess should not be investigating this. And the police force basically are like, oh, you're a civilian, we don't want you to investigate at first, which makes sense. Then later, it's like, no, but also please help us. So she does, because at first she's all for it, no one wants her to do it, and then she ends up having to back off, and then for reasons that are part of the mystery, she can't. Obviously, she's our main sleuth. And then there's just this back and forth for no absolute reason. Either you want her to stay a civilian and stay out of the case, or you need her help, in which case you should establish some boundaries. Because this back and forth, I changed my mind, I don't want to do something I regret with the sheriff, and that hinted romance, which I'm glad didn't work out by the end of this book, It got way too convoluted also at one point. Now, Tess, as a writer, she has a character called Detective Gonzalez, who is the main character in her series, and the sheriff looks like that character by coincidence. And so she literally is like, no, I can't, even think about seeing him in that way, or I can't date him or whatever to Gertie, she says, because it would be like incestuous because she wrote a fictional detective who happens to look like the sheriff. And also throughout the book they compare the two all of the time. Eventually it just got really annoying. Her reasoning was stupid. There's also a situation where books are being stolen from the library and Nikki is looking into it for Tess, and it's really stupid because it has to do with the crime. So like basically, in order to cover up the crime, you're gonna steal books from the library that may have to do with your crime. That's just a generally weird action to take. There were also times when it seemed like Tess and Gertie would be in danger out there in the woods, and at first there's security detail, and then the security detail is retracted and then put back on, and when it was taken away, it seemed like they were in a lot of danger, and I thought that was weird on the sheriff's part, but also because of the rapport between him and Tess. It felt like it was done to spite her. There is something between these two that make it so grating for me to even think about them going on a single date. Do I think that there was a certain point in the book, and not in the beginning, mind you, when that arm came out of the pond and was like, but there was a part in the middle of the book where I was like, maybe you should take your kid home so that you can be safe. But she doesn't. In the end, she and Gertie are kind of used as bait to lure out the killer. And then when she points this out to the sheriff, he's like, no, I already knew I could have done this without your help. No. This family is the catalyst to resolving this mystery. The fact that he had the ego to say that, which if he was able to figure it out, have the proper evidence and everything to put the killer behind bars, he should have done that a while ago. And also, at some point, it seemed like he was trying to scare her off. That's why I'm like, she should have just left. She shouldn't give him the time of day. But because Tess is who she is in her personality, if a romance happens between him and her, it'll just be like, oh, well, that's the past. Bygones are bygones. These things just happen, But from an outsider's perspective, it's like, no, what happened was messed up. And you can't just expect one party to forgive as the band-aid to an entire trust issue relationship, because that is what it will be. Also, I know that in a lot of cozy mystery books, a lot of our main leads are women. There's no issue with that. Sometimes men are portrayed in a manner that's not as observant, maybe less detail-oriented. And this differs across the board with different characters because they're built as different characters. That makes sense. A lot of the men in this book, even the sheriff, who seems promising at first, end up depicted as incompetent in ways that they should be competent, or just incompetent in general, to the point where it stands out. And as a reader, I don't want it to stand out. I don't think it needs to happen. It's not subtle, especially when one of these people is your sheriff and he's supposed to be by the book and he's supposed to be so good, but he's an idiot. He made so many horrible missteps. The husband was stupid. The triplets were all stupid to varying degrees because there are triplets in this book. Even her grandfather, who doesn't really have a part in this book, he's dead. He's dead before we're even introduced to the characters. She inherited that cabin because he's dead. He has a hardware store in town. She didn't know if she inherited it. It's all going through probate. And Nikki tells her, well, you know, the keys are hanging there outside the shop. And it's like, well, no wonder someone broke in. Can you tell I'm still frustrated by this? And by the way, all of these issues are just added onto by the fact that Tess is really annoying. That does do it for my review. Ultimately, I just wish that the mystery was better with a better payoff, because I think then maybe I would be interested in looking at another book in the series, but at this point in time, no. Thank you for joining me for Cozy Saturday, and I will see you next time. Bye.